Surprise! Before the internet lights me ablaze and say this was more of like the April Fool's patch.
Shut the fuck.
Before I begin, this video was initially scripted to be a critique towards flats. However, after spending a bit of time talking to you guys in a community post, after talking to others in Discord, and after talking to flats personally in DMs after I released a teaser of my video on Twitter where people tagged him, I decided that it was more appropriate to tailor my video towards the Overwatch dev team and going even broader, Activision Blizzard themselves, rather than specific creators who have obviously had less influence. It's also very important to clarify the entire purpose of this video, which is down to 5 main reasons. Firstly, to critique Activision Blizzard by being one of the worst organizations of all time, to critique the Overwatch dev team and the creators with regards to the recent experimental patch, to critique elitism in content creation via a personal dispute I had with flats, evaluating the critiques and seeing if there are any realistic solutions to the issues that we have. And lastly, to experiment with entertainment and education in my content. I hope the intro was a sneak peek into that, but I've got a handful more memes lined up which I definitely enjoyed making. Well, let's get started with the first part, the big corporation being Blizzard themselves. There's a lot that's happened just within this year, so I obviously won't cover every little detail, but rather the broad overview that has left Blizzard bleeding by a death by 1,000 cuts approach. Here's ioStux giving a really succinct explanation to why Blizzard are getting destroyed by their rival company Riot. I'll fill in the gaps he misses afterwards.
When you add all that up, all that innovation on Riot's side in a number of ways, in the way they're approaching TV, music, game development, connected IP, treating their talent better, and then exploitation on the Blizzard side, where they're basically just using influencers without paying them extra, without fostering a relationship, where they're exploiting their own developers, and where they're dropping games so they don't make a quick buck for them, has led to this in this past week. And that is a complete, total collapse of Blizzard's stock market price. They are a third less valuable and heading lower. And there is no near-term catalysts that are going to change this. You might be thinking, okay, well, they'll bounce back when they get more games or money. But the truth is, when your company has such negative momentum like this and such bad PR, what you end up with is a brain drain. This is the biggest threat to a company of Blizzard's size. And that is where your talent starts leaving. And with Blizzard, this has been meteoric. This is 4 studios formed in the past year and a half. These are all ex-Blizzard. And that leaves them with no talent to make the games they need to save their company. Not only are you losing people, but you can't hire anybody.
The big elephant in the room that wasn't mentioned was the lawsuit flagged as of mid to late July as of this year with discrimination and gross sexual misconduct towards females. Here's a quick breakdown of key events that recently happened. There's a really great article linked in the description for the full timeline. In mid-November, it was alleged that Bobby Kotick not only knew, but was a participant himself in the allegations, and as a result, employers announced a walkout and rightfully demand for Kotick's resignation. Not too soon after, PlayStation boss Jim Ryan and Xbox boss Phil Spencer joined in to slam Activision Blizzard, and as of a week ago, Jessica Gonzalez, senior test analyst for ABK, resigns from the company, further calling out Bobby Kotick, aiding in a sharper drop for Blizzard's stock market price. There's also the discrimination against former Blizzard co-head Jen O'Neill, alongside the deceit from Mike Ybarra, as Freedo from your Overwatch details here.
A recent Wall Street Journal article breaks down the actual truth behind the resignation of Jen O'Neill, who in the midst of the scandal was put as co-head in front of Blizzard, but had her own sexual discrimination complaints against the company, and felt that her appointment was completely tokenistic, which is to say, Bobby Kotick's strategy is to deny, saying he knew nothing about the frat boy culture and the abuse going on at the company, but further emails in the Wall Street Journal seem to indicate he not only knew, he was an abuser himself. And everything he's done is to try to control the optics and protect himself without taking accountability. Mike Ybarra, who was placed as co-leader of Blizzard along Jen O'Neill, according to Tracy Kennedy, was getting praise for his amazing leadership when 3 months in, he hasn't even met with a dev team once to introduce himself, but has somehow had the time to tweet daily about running mythic dungeons in World of Warcraft.
So considering the past few minutes, that's what's caused Blizzard's stock market price to be sliced by over a third, and relating back to Overwatch, this is probably what's caused the delay in game development from next year. Now this brings me onto the topic of what the Overwatch dev team are going to do in this liminal space of waiting for Overwatch 2, with no new content seeming to come from Overwatch 1 anytime soon. And it seems that we have some more of an answer with a new experimental patch designed by content creators being purposely made for over-the-top changes rather than serious ones, and here are my thoughts on that. Keep in mind that I will evaluate these critiques later on because there's no good in pointing out flaws when you have no real solution. So on your screen is a direct quote from Flats to me in DMs. Long story short, I released a teaser of this video on Twitter, people tagged them, and Flats DM me, which I'll get onto in the third part of this video. We were directly told to make it memey. However though, I did put competitive like changes, in hopes that in testing would feel good. I also gave them a separate document with serious changes, but that's the best I could do. So to the dev team, why not make a serious patch, which is going to be more healthy for the game in the long term, and prevent people like Octotroph from burning out? If the response is that you're just waiting and you're on limbo for Overwatch 2, then what's the entire point of flat sending you a document for serious balance changes? You don't even have to do anything. Just let a handful of content creators and pro players and coaches synthesize their ideas together, because they're clearly more competent at game balance than you are. Here's a really good tweet from GetQuickDon explaining this really well. Again to the dev team, linking on that last point, why not do both a meme patch and a serious one? Either pick one of the two or do both separately. And in fact, it'd be dope to have a separate content creator game mode where players can play on patches designed by the people they love and watch the most. To the content creators that made this patch, you were given an opportunity no content creator in gaming, let alone Overwatch, has ever had. The question is still unanswered on whether you question the devs to implement multiple experimental patches that have different purposes, or why the devs were so adamant on putting out a meme patch in the first place. So unless you guys went fully on questioning the devs and pushing for a serious experimental, this wasn't the best you could have done. I know for certain that if I had this golden opportunity and the devs were pushing for a meme experimental, I'd want to know why, and whether it's possible to get a second experimental in. To Flats, you also can't insult people on stream for being confused about why there are serious changes that you yourself admit to in a patch that's called Over the Top.
Like, my goal for this was a lot of just like fun, memey, throwing some crazy ideas out there, throwing some realistic ideas out there. No shit, it's not going live, Mr. Bear. Yo, chat, any bears? Over the top balance patch! Stupid! Throwing some realistic ideas out there.
It also doesn't matter if the patch notes were called Over the Top, and I'll explain why. If I made a set of patch notes today, titled it as Over the Top, but I actually made no changes and just made bug fixes, that patch is clearly not over the top. Likewise, if I made a set of patch notes which I said were completely serious, but then I gave, let's say, Brig 400 HP and doubled her Inspire, it wouldn't seem like I would be acting seriously. Actions speak louder than words. You can say anything you want, but it's ultimately what you do that people are going to judge for. So the closing statement. The problem isn't that this patch doesn't have a purpose or that it's pointless. It's breathing fresh air into a game that's going to be 5v5 anyways. But the issue is that this isn't an excuse to slack off competitively for another year, or even longer if Overwatch 2 is being released in 2023. Educational channels like mine will be left in the dust because nobody will want to play competitive anymore, and your top talent, or people who just want to play the game competitively, will start leaving throughout next year, as they have been doing so this year. And you could easily fix this by just having one more patch, and it pleased so many more people by making ranked actually fun. Whilst not wholly related, SVB did recently make a video going over why ranked is broken, but the whole purpose of that video is pointless if we just leave ranked rotting throughout next year. Now moving on to the slightly more personal part of the video, which is to do with elitism in content creation. Specifically, I want to tackle Flats' idea, which he presented in SVB's most recent podcast episode, which in short was him getting Blizzard to have large streamers get more regular drops to retain more interest in the game, as well as receiving more support overall. Now this in itself isn't a bad thing. In fact, I think it helps almost everyone in the community. It obviously helps large streamers maintain their audience whilst getting a bag, and it also helps the community as they receive drops and more content. So what is there to not like? Well, arguably, a monopoly may be created if larger creators started receiving more support than smaller creators, or at least the gap between the two would increase. Although I think this is somewhat of a weak argument, as everyone gets more in their play anyways, and drops aren't hard to enable. But even with this being said, I want to show you how hard it actually is to get positive attention from content creators at the top, which I'll do via a personal dispute I had with Flats. To keep this quick, some of you may already know that I donated the super in hopes that he'd look over my 90,000 word Overwatch guide, and it ended up on Fresh Nuts on Noob Hunter. But what most don't know is that I also donated to Flats and got quite the adverse reaction.
Yo, Kjor, I'm gonna keep it a buck for you real quick. Don't go around self-advertising this work. It's gonna leave a really bad impression on you. I'm just gonna be honest. I was you once. To be honest with you, I kind of used to do the same thing. A 90,000 word, 8-hour long. Fast forward to now, and Flats has apologized to me in DMs, but I kinda don't buy it. Now the obvious argument for Flats here is what else is he supposed to do? But I'll be tackling the way in which he quote unquote apologizes to me. Here's me quickly breaking it down, and also note that I'm being purposely over the top for entertainment purposes. Anyways, I wanted to say I'm sorry that you were hurt by my response to your dono on stream.
Well, obviously, spending the better part of 1,000 hours to create top level content for a dying game that is mismanaged by the dev team and by big corporate overlords to then be mocked by people who are supposed to be positive representations for the community. Yet congrats Sherlock, of course I was going to be hurt by that. I treated it like anyone who donos a streamer to promote their own content. I know it must have taken a while and meant a lot to you, I get it, even though I still stand by what I said. So this is the part that really gets to me, because how are you still standing by what you said on stream if you just acknowledge that the content I make doesn't apply to the typical low effort content that people make? People make montages, patch notes all the time, but I have yet to see a 90,000 word dissertation or an 8-hour guide on the game. And the only person who comes close is ioStux, who, if you don't know, made a comparably long dissertation but for goats instead. Many streamers, myself included, don't really like when people drop a dono to self-promote, whether that be a Genji montage, their review of patch notes, etc. But it's not a Genji montage, so why are you double downing and applying the same logic? It makes no sense. I know that Park stuck well, since you messaged me above again later to say, well, it worked because it made it on Noob Hunter and Super looked at it. Well, here's the thing, Flats. You don't have to act like Super. You don't have to show it on stream. You don't have to give me anything because I shouldn't be entitled to it. Super, Fresh Nuts and Noob Hunter were just being extra generous for showing it and I'm very grateful for it. All you needed to say was something along the lines of, oh well, thanks for the donation man, but I'm not going to go over it on stream because, well, I don't have time or something, but I'm sure it's good, enjoy the rest of your day, something like that. Not a big condescending speech. So in conclusion, Flats, please
sit down, be humble.
And this is why I'm skeptical on your intentions behind the idea of Blizzard or the dev teams or someone giving you more support, because yes, it does support everyone included, including myself, but considering this situation, I'm worried that people are giving you more credit than due, because I feel that your intentions are mainly self-centered and in self-interest. But don't worry guys, with all this being said, I did have a call with Flats on Discord, and here's how it went. Yo Flats, what's up? I know you DM'd me earlier this morning giving your extremely serious and sincere apology to me with regards to my whole guide thing, which definitely wasn't caused by me calling you out on Twitter, but regardless. Unfortunately, despite your clarification on the whole experimental patch, I'm still going to go through the video, and I'll make sure to plug your name in the title for views, if that's okay with you.
How dare you critique me? You better dump it. Dump the video, or I will leash the ufetomeble wrath of my audience onto your channel, and your career will be destroyed.
Well, you know, I'm not quite scared of that, unfortunately, so, I'll still be going through with the video, but, yeah, you do you, man.
Well, I'm afraid you have me with no other option. Do you even know who I am? You and your average Twitter reply, and your garbage, le effort content, is over for you. Goodbye.
Now into the end of the video, which I'll try to keep somewhat short, but these are the solutions to the problems flagged up in the video. First off, the one I mentioned earlier on, but I have a content creator game mode to incentivize fans to play on patches tailored by their favourite creators. Secondly, and this idea is from Freedo, but essentially rip off the band-aid for Overwatch 2 and do a soft release early next year, around the time of when pros get to play the early build of Overwatch 2 in the Overwatch League. This would hype up fans in the game and provide more than enough content throughout 2022 up until 2023 to wait until the PvE side of Overwatch, or until all the extra heroes in the Overwatch PvP are finished. Also, there'd be an obvious disconnect between the players and the pros if the pros just played on Overwatch 2 throughout the entire year. Thirdly, make the game free to play. Now I'm sure that this is very likely, if not confirmed, but the main con of this is that Blizzard will have to charge and make money via microtransactions, meaning that you'll be charged for skins, or maybe even heroes, similar to Rainbow Six Siege. But this is just what the industry does nowadays. For games like Fortnite, Apex Legends, Valorant, and Warzone, Overwatch would be behind in this aspect, especially in terms of player base. Fourthly, content creators need to be holding more tournaments. This is especially true with the build up to pros playing Overwatch 2 in April. Workshop makers could recreate the build of Overwatch 2 that pros would play on, but on Overwatch, and if top level content creators would set up pugs or tournaments on this patch, this could really drive up player hype and player counts. Well, that's the end of the video. With all of this in mind, I think everyone can at least agree that Blizzard is one hell of a scummy company, and that the concept of Overwatch 2 was just a bad idea in general. Let me know any more solutions down in the comments down below, and let me know if you enjoyed this type of content. Until next time.